Wow, what a first race of the season we had in Bahrain. It got off to a bit of a slow start, but it got spicy around the first pit stops, and then we had a dramatic twist at the end. Let's take a quick look at qualifying before we break down the race. We've got some really interesting battles emerging between teammates already, some quite big gaps. Let's take a look at Q1. So first off, we've got Nicholas Latifi in 20th. Quite surprised that Williams has sat that far down. I mean, of course his teammate qualified quite a bit higher, but quite surprised to be seeing Williams at the back of the grid. Lance Stroll in 19th, out-qualified by his teammate Nico Hülkenberg. That's pretty disappointing considering Nico Hülkenberg's been drafted in this race for Sebastian Vettel, who's ill with COVID, already beaten by 2.5 tenths. That's not a great start for Lance Stroll. And then in 18th place we've got Daniel Ricciardo. Now, I think McLaren are probably the biggest talking point of the Bahrain weekend. I mean, that's really disappointing, but if you put it into context of McLaren had a pretty awful test in Bahrain. Daniel had COVID himself, so he's had very limited running. He also had a little bit of an interrupted practice session, so it's not been an ideal start for Daniel, but I think this is really a little bit worse than anyone was really expecting. Yeah, not good. He had a rough start last year. He's having a rough start this year. I think it's going to take McLaren a few races to get back up to speed. They look like they have a good car if they can get on top of their brake issues, but Daniel was comprehensively out-qualified by his teammate, which is a real shame for Daniel. And then we've got Yuki Tsunoda in 16th. Pretty disappointing. Again, outpaced by his teammate by quite a large margin in Q1. He'll definitely be hoping to close the gap up in future races, but he actually didn't have too bad a race in the end. So if we move on to Q2, we've got Guan Yu Zhou, or Zhou Guan Yu as he wants to be known as, in 15th. Not a bad quali for Zhou, pretty comprehensively beaten by his teammate Bottas, but Bottas is very highly regarded, and this is Zhou's first race, so got to give him some slack with that. We've got Albon in 14th, pretty decent result for him. Lando Norris in 13th. I mean, if McLaren are not up to full speed yet, that's actually not a bad result for Lando. He'd be pretty disappointed to not be in Q3, but I think that's where McLaren are right now, and fingers crossed they can move forward throughout the season. Got Mick Schumacher in 12th, his best qualifying ever. I guess in the context of being beaten by his teammate Magnussen, not ideal, but a good result for him. And then we've got Ocon in 11th. And then we move on to Q3. Pierre Gasly in 10th place. George Russell, pretty disappointing. He tried something in his final lap, apparently advised by the team, going out a little bit harder on his out lap, and that meant he just went really deep into turn 1, and I think he was already a second down in the first sector. So that pretty much put him out of contention for a decent quali result. You got Alonso in 8th in the Alpine. You got Kevin Magnussen in P7. That is a fantastic result. His first race back in well over a year. I think there's just such a good feeling around Haas right now. It's mad how they had a pretty rough start to the season, but there's just such a feel-good feeling around Haas right now, and I think Magnussen is a big part of that. Bottas in 6th, lining up on the same row as Lewis Hamilton. That's just, it's mad. I mean, that is such a great result for Valtteri. He's highly regarded in terms of his qualifying, so perhaps no surprise, but that is decent. And then we've got Lewis in 5th, probably the best that him and Mercedes could hope for. The gap maybe not as big as I would have expected, only 3 tenths to Perez in 4th. Sergio in P4, beaten by 2.5 tenths by his teammate. Not the biggest gap we've seen between the Red Bull teammates. Carlos Sainz in 3rd. Apparently he's been struggling all week. He was struggling all weekend through practice and just not having the feeling in the car. He said that he had to actually think about his driving, so slowed him down, and he was actually pretty pleased to only be a 10th behind Charles Leclerc. Max Verstappen in 2nd. Actually quite surprised he didn't get the pole. It seemed that Ferrari had time and pace in hand, so perhaps that's all they can expect right now, but obviously we'll talk about the race in a moment. But I think Red Bull felt quite confident going into the race that they might have had a bit of a pace advantage over Ferrari. But what a pole for Charles Leclerc. Pre-season favourites Ferrari managed to convert that into the pole. I think it's going to be a great battle between Ferrari and Red Bull, and perhaps Mercedes deeper into the season. I just wanted to bring up this interesting graphic from the official F1 Instagram account, and it's comparing the best grid slot for each team from 2021 to 2022 in Bahrain. And the trend that is really easy to see is that all of the Ferrari powered cars have moved up. So you've got Ferrari moving up, Alfa Romeo, and Haas. You've also then got all of the Mercedes cars moving backwards. You've got Mercedes themselves, Aston Martin, McLaren and Williams have stayed the same. It's quite an interesting trend, and I guess I've got two theories behind that. One, Ferrari have come out and said that they have improved their engine this year, and from the GPS tracing that does appear to be the case. Ferrari have made a step forward with their engine. And secondly, I wonder if, because all the Ferrari powered teams were doing so badly last year, they abandoned their 2021 efforts before all the other teams, and they got the jump on some of the Mercedes, Honda and Renault powered cars, and perhaps that is paying dividends. So, and then on to the race, and as I mentioned, it was a slow start amongst the front few cars. It was pretty stationary until the first stops, and then that's when things started to get pretty interesting. So I'm going to start off with Ferrari, and what a result. A 1-2, Charles coming in first, Sainz coming in second. Of course, they did inherit second place due to the Red Bull double DNF, but it was a brilliant race from Ferrari. Charles had great pace in the race. At the first pit stops, Red Bull pitted a lap earlier, and the undercut seemed to be quite powerful. Max was perhaps 3 or 4 seconds off Charles before he pitted and came out right on his gearbox, and on the next lap sent it up the inside. Charles getting back into turn 4, and that happened again 2 more times. Max sent it up the inside, I think on the last attempt, locking up pretty badly, coming from miles back. And it was a nice battle between Charles and Max. Of course, they do have history. There's a video that's gone round of them in their karting days having a little spat after an incident, and they've had a few ding-dongs in F1 as well. So if it's a Charles v Max battle for the season, then I can't wait for that. I have a feeling Sainz is going to get involved. I have a feeling Merc are probably going to up their game further on into the season, and it'd be amazing if we could have 5 or 6 cars with the potential to win a race. Sainz had a pretty good race. He did come under pressure from Sergio Perez and Hamilton at the beginning, but it was a steady race for him. I think he'll be pretty happy with that and looking to build on that in the future. So then moving on to Red Bull, they sat 2nd and 4th for the majority of the race. Of course, Max challenging for the lead, but ended up with a double DNF, which was massively unexpected and incredibly disappointing for Red Bull. I mean, they've already given up 44-point lead to Ferrari. I think it's 30 odd points to Mercedes. That's pretty awful, as bad as it can get. Max, of course, having an issue, I think it was in the 3rd stop. Apparently his track rod got broken, the rod for the steering. Said his steering was getting heavy, and then engine conked out. Max sounded pretty irate on the radio, seemed a bit unhinged. I mean, he had a go at his team in qualifying, saying he's never going to do a slow out lap again. Did exactly the same after pit stop 2 and 3, I believe, saying to the team he's never going slow again. I mean, I can't believe we're in race 1. Yeah, they're going to be feeling pressure. It's not like you losing that World Championship in the first race. So to being so aggressive towards your team so early on, it seems odd. And Checo had, an alright race. Nothing to write home about. Unlucky, to be honest, to not finish on the podium after inheriting 3rd from his teammate going out with a reliability issue, but of course suffering what appears to be a similar issue as well. Apparently it was a fuel pump issue, which has become a standard part for all the teams this season. Yeah, there'll definitely be investigation needed into that, and perhaps Red Bull will protest that. I mean, if it's not a Red Bull part, they'll be pretty aggrieved at that. And then onto Mercedes, finishing P3 and P4. Lewis getting an unexpected podium, and George recovering from 9th to 4th. We know that Mercedes weren't sandbagging. They legitimately do not have a race-winning car right now. So to inherit a 3rd and a 4th is actually a best-case scenario, I think, for Mercedes. They'll definitely take that. And I can't believe I'm saying that. You know, a 3rd and a 4th for Mercedes in years gone by is a bit of a disaster, but that was a good result. Steady race from Lewis, put pressure on drivers ahead of him, backed off. I mean, at one point before the safety car came out, I think they were 30 odd seconds behind the Red Bulls and the Ferraris, so still a lot of work to do. The hard tyre switch on their second stint was a mistake. I think they were dropping a second a lap there. Yeah, lessons learned from Mercedes, and to be honest, a great result. And what a feel-good result for Haas. P5 for Kevin Magnussen and 11th for Michael Schumacher. 11 for Mick Schumacher. Schumacher was hit early on by Ocon on the first lap, which Ocon came out and apologised for and got a penalty. But other than that, seemed to be a pretty solid race for him. Best finish. Probably disappointed to finish out of the points, but a good solid start for Mick. And Kevin Magnussen, just what a weekend he's had. He did make a couple of mistakes into turn 1, locking up his brakes and giving up a couple of positions, but still a fantastic result. And P5 for Haas after the season they've had last year, bringing up the back of the field race after race. Such a good feeling. So well done to the Haas team. I think they're going to be in for a good season. It's going to be a tough battle for them to stay best of the rest, but what a great start. And then on to Alfa Romeo, Bottas finishing 6th, Zhou finishing 10th. Awful start for Valtteri Bottas, starting 6th, dropped down to something like 14th. It was an awful first lap for Bottas, but actually a really good recovery drive. And I do wonder if he could have got Magnussen if he hadn't have had such a bad start. Given Alfa Romeo's first test, I actually thought they might not be in such great shape, but it looks like they've got a great car underneath them. Zhou had a good race, moving up the field, getting his first point. That's a decent result for Alfa Romeo. And then on to Alpine. Ocon in 7th, Alonso in 9th. They always seem to be on the same bit of track. I feel like whenever they showed the pink Alpine cars, they're always battling one another. Alonso did get the call to let Ocon through to maximise the team result. Decent haul of points for Alpine. AlphaTauri, Yuki finishing in 8th. Good recovery drive for him. Gasly with a DNF. Engine catching fire, I believe it's an electrical issue. And of course Gasly causing the safety car through no fault of his own. Nice recovery from Yuki. He'll be happy with the points. Pretty poor qualifying for him. Aston Martin, Stroll with a nice recovery to 12th. Hulkenberg in 17th. Yeah, I mean it seems a bit of a struggle for Aston Martin at the minute. Struggling with porpoising. Williams coming in 13th and 16th. Albon in 13th. And then McLaren finishing in 14th for Daniel and 15th for Lando. Yeah, I mean, disappointing race weekend for the McLaren boys. Daniel was definitely last at one point. I think Lando also, when he pitted, came out last. Not a good situation right now for McLaren. I mean, I guess slight consolation in beating his teammate for Daniel, but they don't want to be racing for 14th, 15th. They want to be well up into the points, so work to do for McLaren. So, what do you think of the race? Let me know what you'd give out of 10 in the comments below. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I think it was a pretty decent first race, and as Bahrain always does, it built up to a climax. Straight on to the next race in Saudi Arabia. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.